Owen sat in front of his computer, scrolling through his favorite sites in search of a deal. He ran a shop that sold toys, board games, and anything that less conventional type of people would enjoy. He had pretty much made hobbies and games his life focus. But one thing he valued over everything else were trading card games. TCGs are what got him started in the business in the first place. He was about ready to call it a night and shut down his computer. The Halloween Games Bash was just around the corner, and he had a ton of things that he still needed to get done. But he wanted to check one more site before logging off. Craigslist was always a gamble. 99% of the time, people sold/gave away things that were total junk. But every once in a while, a gem could be picked up out of the site. Owen's eyes grew wide at a post he stumbled across on the forum. Someone was giving away a box full of cards from his favorite TCG game. He could spot in the picture at least a dozen cards that could easily sell for thousands of dollars apiece. The only catch being that he had to get the box and remove it. Jumping at the opportunity, he got out his cell phone and texted the number on the screen. "Is the box still available for pickup?" Owen sat by his phone, eagerly hoping no one else had noticed the post yet. "It is. Do you want the address?" Jumping out of his chair, he pumped his fist into the air. This would be a big pickup for his shop. Who knew what kind of cards could be in the box that he couldn't see in the picture? The thrill of the hunt is what got him into TCGs in the first place. He got the address and shut down his shop early. This was simply too big of an opportunity to wait on. Typing the address into his GPS revealed it was a bit out of town, about a 20-minute drive. Small price to pay for a free box of valuable cards, Owen thought to himself. Making the trip gave his mind time to think about the situation. Was this too good to be true? In the internet age, why wouldn't someone take 5 minutes to look at the value of the cards instead of just giving it away? He was getting some red flags, but the potential prize was too great. Nothing risked, nothing gained, right? Pulling up to the address revealed an old house standing in the middle of a field. It was a place time had forgotten, and the town decided to expand in a different direction. The small shelter had a tiny dirt path leading up to it that caused Owen's car to rock back and forth. Pulling into the driveway, he saw a young woman sitting on the porch with an old-fashioned lantern hanging from a beam. She gave him a wave and a big smile. Feeling a bit more at ease now, he got out of his car and waved back. "Hey, just here to pick up the boxes of cards?" "Of course. Sorry you had to come all this way to get it, but it was too heavy for me to move," replied the young woman. Saying the property looked rough would be an understatement. The place looked like it was a retired junkyard that had bits of old scrap nobody wanted. "So, do you live here?" asked Owen curiously. The woman considered the question for a moment before responding, "Sort of, well, not yet at least. It's a fixer-upper project. I bought it at auction because I needed a place with a bit more privacy. Tired of everyone being in my business." That made sense to Owen. He always assumed he would do the same thing after the shop had run its course. "Well, guess you're ready to get that box, right?" The young woman grabbed the lantern and guided him through the house. "Sorry, no electricity yet. Money's a little tight right now." Grabbing his cell phone out of his pocket, he turned on the flashlight feature. Pointing it in front of him, he saw something his mind could not comprehend. A creature with eyes that had pupils going the wrong direction fled from the light and into an adjacent room. He tried to backpedal away from the thing, but tripped on a pile of books, causing him to crash hard on the old wooden floor. The sudden noise caused the woman to jump, nearly losing the lantern. Turning around, she looked down at Owen, puzzled by the situation. "Are you okay?" What was that thing? Fighting back the panic that was creeping into his voice. The young woman considered the question for a moment before a look of recognition sprang onto her face. "Oh, you saw the goat. Yeah, that's my pet goat. Sorry, I should have warned you." Thinking about it, the strange eyes made sense now. He never really liked the look of goat eyes. Owen couldn't understand why people think they're cute. They honestly look like little monsters. Getting up from the floor, he noticed the pile of books he had tripped into appeared to be home remedies and herbal medicines. This stuff work? Picking up the book about the tea leaves and how they can improve your body and mind. No such luck yet. My little brother has cancer, so we've been trying everything, replied the woman. Hearing this caused a twinge of guilt to strike him deep into his core. Here he was, about to take potentially thousands of dollars in cards from someone who had a family member dying of cancer. But his shop was struggling. He really needed this money to get out of debt. So he pushed that feeling away and replied with, "Oh, sorry to hear that." "Thank you. Well, here it is," pointing at a large closet with a single box inside. This was it, the treasure he had been waiting for. Potentially the end to his financial problems lay in a large cardboard box. Walking past the woman, he went inside the closet and looked into the box. But when he opened the box, his world fell apart. It was completely empty. Just as he was about to turn around, a large object struck him over the head, sending him into the empty box. Before he could regain his footing, the woman snatched his cell phone out of his hands and slammed the door shut. The room immediately went dark without a light source. Owen got back up on his feet and charged the door, sending his shoulder at it to break it down. However, instead of hearing the splintering sound of wood, it made a dull thud as he bounced off of it and back onto the ground. Getting up to feel the door, he could tell it was made of metal. Opening a small slit in the door allowed a bit of light into the cell. "Sorry about this, but I need you to stay here for a few days while I get everything ready for my little brother," said the young woman. "Look, I'll give you however much money you want. Just let me go," pleaded a desperate Owen. "Money?" said the young woman with a hint of ire in her voice. "I don't need money. I need my little brother to be healthy again, and you're going to help me with that. We tried everything from medical science to herbal remedies. Nothing worked. So I turned to something a bit different. Something more on the occult side. And let me tell you, it didn't disappoint. I found a book that taught me everything I needed to know." Looking through the slit in the iron door, Owen saw the pet goat wander back into the room. Only this time he was getting a better look at it. He was realizing just how large it was, bigger than any goat he had seen before. Then it stood up off the ground, standing tall over the woman.
"This sacrifice will do,"
replied the goat creature, just as the woman shut the small slit in the door, returning the cell back to darkness. The motel owner stretched his legs as he exited the office. It looked like he had another guest take off without checking out. When he first started, it used to surprise him that people would disappear without a word, but now it was just another Tuesday. Arriving at the room, he knocked hard on the door, making sure to alert anyone inside. After a few minutes passed without an answer, he used the master key to unlock the door. Stepping inside the room, he noticed that whoever had been there before had left their stuff. Laying on the ground was a pair of shoes, dress slacks, undergarments, and a button-up shirt tossed together. He pushed the pile across the room with his foot and noticed it had jewelry mixed into it. Taking a closer look at the belongings revealed the pants still had a cell phone in the back pocket, and the underwear and bra were still inside the clothes. It was as if the person wearing them had just vanished on the spot, leaving everything in a disorganized mound. This thought sent a chill down his spine. Something about all this was just plain wrong. Looking around the room for any clues of what happened to the guest, the owner noticed a notebook and pen sitting on the bed. Grabbing the notebook, he sat down at the small desk in the room and flipped on the lamp. He felt weird reading through somebody's notes, but he was honestly bored and maybe it could provide some clarity on this strange situation. I'm writing this now in my motel room because I'm worried my luck has run out. I want to warn other people so they don't end up like me. My name is Grace Anna Davis, and I'm a detective for the LBPD. If you look, you won't find any record of me. My role is a detective and apparently the city of Lockwood Bridge. I just learned today that the city I'm in is actually called Lockwood Pass. One of the many minor differences I've discovered since arriving here. I know this is confusing, so let me just start at the beginning. I was investigating some odd disappearances that had taken place in the city of Lockwood Bridge. Mostly cold cases, about a dozen or so over the years. Well, I noticed all the people who went missing did so around the same time each year, the month of October, which happens to be when the fine people of Lockwood Bridge put on the Fall Festival. My working theory was an outside vendor was coming to town during this time, taking people and then moving to the next place. A serial killer who was traveling around the nation grabbing people. I didn't have any proof. We never recovered a single body. Like I said, it was just a working theory. This year I decided I would patrol the fairgrounds and start interviewing the vendors. I walked those grounds every night for 5 nights after my shift, talking to any vendors at the place I could find. And after all that work, I came up empty-handed. However, on the 6th and final night of the event, I found a strange tent on the outskirts of the festival. It was a bright red and white striped canvas structure that was comically large, with a neon sign just above the booth that displayed the words, Zoltan's Mystic Emporium. It even had a torchlit path guiding people to the site, like a temple to be honored. Of course, I followed the path to the tent, thinking this could be the break in the case. But I felt I had to play it cool, not tip my hand too early, or I could spook whoever this was. Standing under the neon sign was a rather peculiar man. He wore a top hat and cape, and was dressed like an old-timey magician. I'll never forget the words he said to me.
Greetings and salutations, my friend. 'Tis a fine night to browse Zoltan's Mystic Emporium. Would you like to see a new cosmos free for thee?
The act was over the top, and he had the smile printed on his face, like he had told the best joke in the world. It was utterly obnoxious. It honestly made me want to slap the taste out of his mouth. But I played along, thinking I could get more information by looking around. I said sure, and he waved me into the tent. I wish now I had never accepted his offer. Stepping inside, I was hit with an electrical burning aroma that gave me a headache right away. I turned around to ask the guy what was up with the smell, and then with a puff of smoke he was gone. Like it was a bad magic trick and he disappeared under a trapdoor. I stumbled outside to get away from the smoke that was choking me now. Coughing and looking through watering eyes, I discovered that it was daylight and the fair was gone. The only sign left that Zoltan even existed was the large red and white tent. I wondered, how long had I been inside this thing? Did he manage to drug me somehow? With no other course of action left, I walked back to the parking lot. That was when I learned that things were certainly not right. My car was gone. At the time, I thought someone stole it or it got towed. But the truth is, my car didn't exist anymore. Or I should say, my car didn't exist here anymore. Then I tried to use my cell phone to get a ride, but my service wasn't connected. With no other choice left, I decided I would walk back into Lodgewood. After all, it was only a 30-minute hike from the fairgrounds. As I made the trek back into town, I became aware of the fact that I was being followed. About 400 feet behind me was an odd-looking man wearing a suit and a fedora. Something about it just looked out of place, like it was an outfit from the 40s. At the time, I didn't understand, but something about his presence was unnerving. I think it was his walk. It looked jerky or mechanical, I guess. I had enough on my plate at the moment that I didn't want to figure out what was wrong with him. So I picked up my pace and was easily able to lose him on the way to town. However, I would find no refuge from my perplexing problems. Just more questions. I walked to my house and discovered it didn't exist. The street name was correct. The houses looked familiar, but I could tell it was not my house. I even tried my key to the front door, and of course it didn't fit. With no vehicle, house, or cell phone, I sat down on the sidewalk, trying to figure this out. Was I losing my mind? It seemed possible, but I felt sane enough. However, do crazy people know they're losing it? A question I could explore at another time. I am a detective, and part of my job is putting together pieces and figuring out the truth. So if this was an investigation, what would I do next? I decided I needed to collect a bit more evidence and get back to the scene of the crime. I picked myself up off the sidewalk and began my journey to Lodgewood downtown. I knew I would need a car if I was going to figure this out. It was not practical to keep walking everywhere, so I would need to rent a vehicle for now. Going to the ATM, of course, my debit cards didn't work. Going inside the bank, I discovered I didn't have a bank account anymore, and I'm pretty sure the teller thought I was trying to commit fraud. I just awkwardly left without trying to explain myself, because how do you explain this situation? With no other choice left, I went inside the pawn shop across the street and sold one of my rings and a bracelet for half its value. Then they had the gall to act like they were doing me a favor. I really hate those places, but what choice did I have? I held on to my grandma's ring and necklace. Things would have to get really bad for me to consider selling them. Exiting the pawn shop, I saw the man in the 40s suit again. He had somehow followed me all the way here. However, this time he was not alone. Two identical clones of the man were staggering towards me, and now that I was closer, I could see their faces. They had mouths, but no eyes or noses. It was just a translucent flesh that covered the area. None of the other people in town seemed to respond to them, or even try to avoid them, and the suit men only seemed interested in me. I backed away from the three of them, looking for an exit. I asked them what the hell they wanted, and in that terrifying moment, I got my first real clue. The first one responded with a single word.
Transgressor.
The next one responded with another simple response.
Invader.
And the third kept mumbling the words.
Don't belong.
I didn't comprehend the answer, but I was not sticking around to find out its meaning. I easily ran past them and down the road towards the car rental shop. Looking back, they appeared to be unable to increase their speed. They were slow, but persistent, and focused on me. I noticed it was not the speed that made their walk look strange. The effect was created by the fact they seemed to be phasing in and out of existence. It was like watching a movie that skipped every other frame. I bolted into the car rental office and threw the money on the counter. The clerk looked shocked and a bit perplexed on why I was rushing him. I did my best to remain calm, but I knew my demeanor was making him suspicious of me. He took a copy of my ID and asked for a credit card. I knew after the bank incident, my credit cards didn't work. Through the thin walls of the office, I could hear the wails of the suit men just outside now. I pleaded with him to allow me to pay it in cash instead, but I could tell he was not going to entertain that offer. Then, that is when I learned the true nature of the suit men. One phased through the wall and attempted to grab me. I managed to stumble back just in time to avoid its icy clutch, but the rental attendant was not so lucky. The suit man must have grabbed him by mistake, and he just vanished into the ground, like he had been dragged out of this reality. I keep replaying that scene in my mind, and I don't think he even saw it coming. But in the moment, I couldn't think about anything else. I had to focus on my survival. I managed to dip around the grasping hands and snatched a pair of keys off the wall. The other two suitmen phased through the front door, staggering towards me with outstretched hands. I dashed out the back door and into the outside parking lot. The entire building was now surrounded by at least a dozen of those men, all of them wailing and calling, telling me that I needed to leave. It was like my very presence was drawing them here. By repeatedly pressing the unlock button on the keys, I was able to find the rental car and drive away from the creatures. Looking back through the rearview mirror, the people walking around the downtown shopping area didn't even notice the horde of men following my car. I came to the conclusion that I was the only person who could see them. Now that I was on the road and safe, I had time to think about what I had just experienced. I had this feeling the suit men would never stop, no matter how far away I got or where I decided to go. My only chance was to somehow get back to the Zoltan. He was the only one who could undo this curse. Driving back to the fairgrounds, I searched for the red and white tent, but just like everything else in my life, it was gone. No clues, no explanation, just an empty clearing. I drove all day, looking for a motel that would accept cash, that had an internet connection. Finally, I found a place on the outskirts of the city that most law enforcement would avoid. It was run down and painted an awful red color, but at least it had doors and a bed. I figured at this point I was far enough away that it would take all day for the suitmen to catch me. Although the service on my phone no longer worked, I was able to connect it to the motel Wi-Fi and get access to the internet. Browsing online, I learned the world I was in was slightly different now. World War II ended in 1944. An assassination attempt actually worked, causing the war to end early. I discovered some historically important people had never been born. There were popular songs and movies I'd never heard of before, and classics that no longer existed. It was planet Earth, but it was an alternate one to my home. In a way, I think I solved my cold cases. Zoltan's Mystic Emporium is a portal to an alternate universe. The people didn't die, they just existed in a different universe now. Sounds crazy, I know, but when you put all the evidence together, it's the only story that makes sense. However, I don't think the universe likes uninvited guests. My theory is that the suitmen come to remove people who don't belong. And I've decided I'm not going to run anymore. I don't know what'll happen when they catch me, but I can only hope that they'll take me back to my world, back to my life and my family. If you see a red and white tent called Zoltan's Mystic Emporium, stay away from it. The motel owner set down the notebook and leaned back in the chair. He looked over at the pile of clothes and wondered if the story was true. If it was true, he hoped that Grace made it home somehow. He gathered up her belongings and decided to pocket the jewelry, phone, and cash. He felt bad for her, but he still needed to make a living. The owner left the empty room with the notebook in hand. He hadn't decided what he was going to do with it yet, but it felt wrong to throw it away, especially if it turned out to be her last words in this world. The four friends gathered around the table for their annual Halloween tradition. Each year, one person was in charge of bringing a new Halloween game for the group to play. This year, Elizabeth found something extra special. It was a ritual to tell the future called a dead man's tale. Each person wrote their name on a piece of paper, then burned it in the candle. Next, they had to knock on the door 12 times at midnight, then turn off the lights, leaving only a single candle to light the room. Each person would then tell a single story about someone in the room. However, you're not allowed to use their name, and the story must include how that person would die. According to the online instructions, if the ritual was done correctly, a specter would visit the storytellers and give them their true fortune. This game gave Elizabeth goosebumps just thinking about it. It'd be the best Halloween yet. The four friends followed the ritual and began to tell their stories. One story was about someone being attacked by a murderer who broke into their house. The next was a simple tale, that someone in the room would be involved in a drunk driving wreck. Another miserable fortune foretold was about a trusted friend secretly wishing them dead and being poisoned. After that, a tale was told of a significant other slaying a lover in exchange for life insurance money. And the last story was the most chilling of all, that everyone here would die at the same time because the world was doomed to end. Turning on the lights, the three friends laughed about the game. It certainly was a fun way to spend the last few hours of the night. Guess we'll be visited by a ghost next year, chuckled one participant. However, Elizabeth stood perplexed, unable to make sense of it. Finally, one friend asked, "What's wrong, Elizabeth?" She swallowed hard and asked the question. Everyone only told one story, right? Everyone in the group nodded. Yes, they followed the rules of the game. Then Elizabeth said something that sent chills down everyone's spine. There are 4 of us, but we heard 5 stories. Happy Halloween! Ghastly here. If you're a regular to the channel, give this video a like. It's the best and a free way to support my work. If you're new, consider subscribing for more stories.